Number 5. To most, a cruise ship seems like an excellent getaway vacation. Though, according to the New York Times, many cruise ships are home to a very dark secret: sexual assault. Apparently, sexual assaults are far more rampant on cruise ships than many cruise liners would like you to believe. One such example of this involved a young woman named Amy Bradley. Amy was known to have been a very athletic girl who was an excellent swimmer as well as a trained lifeguard, though one of her deepest fears was the ocean. According to her mother, she wasn't even interested in going on the cruise, yet her father and brother convinced her otherwise. Amy's family says that after setting her fears of the ocean aside, she truly did seem to be having a great time, aside from feeling a bit seasick. In fact, on their third night at sea, Amy and her brother went to a small party that was taking place on the ship, and never returned until about 3:40 a.m. the following morning. According to her father, she came into the room, explained that she was going to sleep on the balcony, and that was the last time that he spoke to her. He states that he awoke a short while later in the night and saw her body from the hips down, lying on the balcony, appearing to be comfortable. Though at 6 a.m., her father awoke to find the sliding door of their room opened. He looked outside and Amy was gone. At this point, he began to panic, as it was very much unlike her to have even been awake this early. The family then contacted the ship's crew and asked that they page Amy over the boat's loudspeaker system, though they declined, stating that it was too early in the morning to use the loudspeakers. Worse yet was that the ship was heading for dock in just a few minutes, meaning that if somebody did have Amy, they would very easily be able to get away with her and flee and never return. To this, Amy's mother pleaded that they not dock the boat until Amy had been found, though once again the crew declined. The crew never paged Amy until about 7:50 a.m., after the boat had already been successfully docked and most of its passengers had already exited. Finally, the captain of the ship ordered a search to be conducted a short while later, and the crew searched over 1,000 rooms that were on the ship, yet they found nothing. Police then became involved and a 3-day search effort was put into place, searching miles and miles of the ocean, though she was never found. A theory soon emerged from the police and the crew members, suggesting that Amy may have been the victim of a slavery ring that was known to have been popular in the Southern Caribbean. Police believe that it's highly likely that she was captured by someone on the boat, and when the boat docked in the Caribbean, she was removed and handed over. This has never been confirmed, but to this day, 20 years later, Amy has still never been found. Number 4. On February 11, 1979, 5 fishermen set sail from the island of Maui on a 17-foot fishing boat which they'd named Sarah Joe. The men were all known to have been excellent fishermen and left the island at around 10 a.m. on a clear day. Though within just a few short hours of the crew's departure, the winds began to unpredictably change and a storm began to blow in. As the storm arrived and the fishermen had not yet returned, a friend of the group left the island in search of them, though none of them were ever found. The following day, the Coast Guard became involved, yet they found no trace of the men either. Over the coming weeks, local residents searched local beaches for any signs that the fishermen may have crashed and washed ashore, yet they still found absolutely nothing. Though some 10 years later, a marine biologist was on an island over 2,000 miles away from where the fishermen had departed, when he noticed a small boat had crashed into a small island in the distance. He approached the boat and saw that it had the letters HA printed on the side, indicating that it was registered in the state of Hawaii, where the men were originally from. As he searched the surrounding area of the boat, he then found a small grave with a human jawbone jutting out of it, as well as a small amount of documentation which led him to positively identify the boat as Sarah Joe. Investigators then arrived at the scene and exhumed the body from its grave. Underneath the skeleton, they found a small notebook. Between each individual page of the notebook, the fishermen had, for reasons unknown, placed a small piece of tinfoil that acted as a type of divider. To this day, no one has any idea why this is or where the crew would have found the tinfoil on a deserted island. Experts on the scene say that it appeared as though the men were lost at sea for upwards of 3 months before they finally made landfall. Though if this is true, why was the boat not found during a police search effort years ago? And also, why was only 1 body found when there were 4 other fishermen? And who was it that buried the man who was found on the island? So many questions have been left unanswered, and it seems as though this case will simply remain unsolved. Number 3. Selena Eden was a promising young woman. When she graduated high school, she was one of the most highly performing students in her class and was even the class president. After school, Selena joined the Air Force for a short while before ultimately becoming a construction worker in the San Francisco area. After working for a short time, she bought herself a motorcycle, but it was this decision that would ultimately change Selena's life forever. While driving home one evening on her bike, Selena was struck by a large truck and sent to a hospital. It was here that she laid in a coma for 6 weeks after she'd suffered brain damage. Additionally, she was known to have had a shattered hip and permanently damaged her left eye, as well as had fluid buildup on her brain. She eventually took part in physical therapy and began to physically improve, though according to her mother, her mental state was worsening. She began to frequently become confused and agitated with virtually no reasoning behind it. Eventually, Selena returned home to a familiar atmosphere and things began to look better for her, and her life slowly began returning to normal. That is, until one evening in October of 1990, when her mother received a call from Selena. In the call, her mother states that Selena was very reserved and evasive to questioning. She says that Selena eventually told her that if she didn't hear from her for more than 1 or 2 months to not worry. After this, she hung up. This is the last time that her mother ever heard from her. Selena was last seen in the surrounding San Francisco area. Her mother, as well as her private investigator, believe that she's most likely still alive, but simply lost and confused somewhere in the United States, possibly living in a government-funded assisted living facility. She's approximately 5'7", African-American, and walks with a slight limp. So if you see anyone matching this description, be sure to contact the appropriate authorities. Number 2. Don Hoffman was a family man, though he was eventually diagnosed with cancer, which was confirmed by 3 separate doctors. Rather than tell his family up front, Don decided to inform his family of his diagnosis by means of a videotape, which would then be given to them after he took his own life. In this tape, Don said goodbye to every one of his family members except for his second wife, Terry, a woman who had founded the spiritual group known as Conscious Development of Body, Mind, and Soul. Many believe that this is because Terry had been involved in his passing. In fact, a total of 11 individuals passed away, all of whom were closely connected to either Terry or her spiritual group. But now, investigators believe that there's a 12th name to be added to this list: Charles Southern. Charles was a well-known English professor, as well as a follower of Terry's spiritual group. Charles suddenly and unexpectedly disappeared one evening after visiting Terry's home in Dallas. In the days leading up to his disappearance, following his visit with Terry, Charles's family found him wandering the streets with a newspaper repeating the phrase, "I lived for art," while also repeating another phrase in an incomprehensible language. His family quickly got him into a car and took him to a local hospital. He was eventually released, but no real changes were ever implemented into his life, and no reasoning behind his psychotic break was ever found. As Christmas was nearing, Charles began to express his interest in taking a trip to India, an idea that his family believed was exceptionally odd. They tried to convince him to stay home in Chicago, but he insisted on his travels. Eventually, his family lost contact with him for many days, which resulted in them driving over 300 miles to his home and kicking in his door, for fear that he may have been hurt. Inside his home, they found a single bar stool, on top of which Charles's clothes were placed neatly folded yet inside out. On top of these clothes were Charles's winter hat and coat, also neatly folded. It wasn't until days later that Charles's family would learn that this was a symbol of Charles's demise. Yet to this day, his body has never been found. Number 1. Kristen Modafferi was a college student who had accepted a job offer from a local coffee shop to help pay for some of her courses. She was known to have been a very easy person to get along with, and her coworkers spoke very fondly of her. Because of this, police officers found it exceptionally strange when she was suddenly reported missing back in June of 1997. According to her coworkers, after she left her job at the coffee shop, which is located inside of a mall, the workers noticed that she wandered around the mall with a blonde woman for a few hours before leaving. This was odd because Kristen was always adamant about leaving the mall immediately after her shift and never hung around. Police, as well as Kristen's family, then searched for this blonde woman, yet found no evidence of her or anyone that may have known her. Police eventually used a bloodhound to retrace Kristen's steps from the day that she went missing, though the hound led them to a trail that ended abruptly, leading into the ocean. Even stranger is that when police searched Kristen's apartment, they found that all of her diary entries for the day leading up to her disappearance had been ripped from the book, but no other usable evidence was ever found. To this day, no one has any idea where Kristen may be or who the blonde woman was that she was chatting with. Her family, as well as investigators, believe that it's highly unlikely that Kristen leaped from the previously mentioned trail into the ocean, though at this point there appears to be no other explanation. As recent as 2015, investigators returned to Kristen's prior residence to search the area for any clues that they may have missed. It was at this point that they found evidence of blood that had been buried in the backyard that belonged to Kristen, yet they found no other indication of foul play, but also no reason why there would have been a decent amount of blood in the yard. To this day, her case remains unsolved, but investigators are still searching for answers. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you like this video, be sure to click that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep updated with our videos.